It's Friday, March 31st, 2017. Today in the news,
Jason Kenney's PC leadership win.
the Canadian Senator Scandalous,
And Trump's alleged Russian ties. I'm Bandringer.
and I'm the Dino Man.
And this is the Broke Canadian Newscast.
There are two guys with more time than money to spare, discussing local to world affairs. There's Bandringer first with the Dino Man last. Here's the Broke Canadian Newscast. So how was your week, Brent?
Oh, it's been pretty great. It's been pretty alright, yeah. I mean, I haven't been doing too much work. The spring is in the air.
It's sprung.
It's sprung. The grass has riz, in fact.
It has risen indeed.
Did you not know the rhyme?
No, I don't.
Spring is sprung, the grass has riz. I wonder where the flowers is.
Oh.
Have you heard that one before?
No, I have never heard
I
that
have
one.
no idea where I picked it up. Maybe from, my granddad, I want to say, maybe? Possible. Anyway, so I haven't been doing too much work. Pretty
Yeah. No, for me it's similar. Work's been somewhat light, although, once again, been finding tons of time for people. So,
yeah.
I've been... most of my weekends have been absolutely jam-packed, which is good. We're getting this out on a Friday.
Yeah, it'd be great. I've been watching some new TV shows. You want to know about my new TV shows? This is often what I do here, is I talk about some new TV shows. Did I tell you about the French period era comedy spy show that I'm watching?
No? What period are we talking?
It's like 1960.
Oh.
Did I thought I talked to you about
I don't remember hearing about this.
yeah, it was...
What's the name?
I think it's called A Very Secret Service on Netflix, although I think the French title translates entirely differently.
Oh, what's the French title?
I think it might be For the Glory of French
Oh, I
Spies.
thought you say it in French. And then
I don't know. The Francais, Vive la France Secrète. That's probably what it is.
Okay.
Exactly. Anyway, so it's a comedy about French spies. Basically this new guy comes in and is kind of captured, stripped into his underwear, and then is asked to join the French Secret Service. And he jumps in and he's basically the only person competent. There's actually a lot of jokes about it's 5 o'clock, why are you still working? And a lot of, for the purposes of anti-terrorism, we have to consider women as people, is a line.
Oh boy.
So there's a lot of that. And there was an entire episode which I didn't quite get a lot of the humor, where an African country is trying to declare its independence.
Algeria?
Was
That's
it
the one tied to France.
It might have been Algeria. One of them, Algeria might have declared its independence at the beginning of, it was maybe Algeria. They go to Algeria at one point.
Well, that's just that's the main
Some of the
colony.
colonies, because one African country declares independence at the beginning, and everybody's mad about it because they're French and it's the 60s, and they also prevent another one through possible nefarious spy stuff.
Oh, interesting.
And it's the kind of stuff I didn't quite get. Also, I don't even remember the name of the country, because it's not a country that exists as it is now.
Okay, yeah,
it's a tiny country. I looked it up. It's like a tiny area. Anyway, I've also been watching, I've been watching some anime, believe it or not.
Ooh, Full Metal.
No. I've been watching One Punch Man.
I've heard about that. Is it hilarious?
It is very hilarious. It's a parody anime.
Yeah.
The premise is that there's this guy who can defeat any enemy with one punch.
Yeah.
And it is quite funny. Anyway, I don't think we have any updates on our news stories.
No. I mean, as we go on, these stories are going to kind of try to mingle with each other.
Oh, yes.
So we'll probably, in the midst of stories, bring up previous stories, albeit briefly. But there's no big major updates to any of the recent stories we've covered.
Yeah, no, for sure. So why don't we get into our local news?
All right. All right, so some fairly big news that popped here in Alberta recently was
like a weasel.
Yeah, or as it...
Or...
depending on your opinion.
A pop.
Or like a pop. It was the PC leadership race.
Yeah.
JC Kenney just swept it.
This was not a surprise
No.
at any point. As soon as he basically announced his candidacy, he was pretty much chosen by the conservative gurus of everyone as the leader.
I don't know if you... I think I showed you this earlier on, but there's
Yeah.
a wonderful, wonderful little fake RPG flash game.
Yes.
With J.C. Kenney trying to go to the two parties, trying to get them to come along his side and make the two warring factions make peace. It's beautifully done. You should look it up. But yeah, unsurprising to no one, but still really large news, is J.C. Kenney is now the leader of the provincial Conservatives, having just left his position as the PC Conservative MP.
Yep, yeah, the leader of the Progressive Conservative Party in Alberta. He ran on a platform of reuniting the two parties. There were 3 candidates in the race by the end. The other 2 were wanting to rebrand under the PC image.
Mm-hmm. Smartly, Jason Kenney decided not to go for that.
I don't know.
We'll see.
Yeah.
He does have his own unique set of views, which we'll get into. But we should probably, first, for even people who don't really know who Jason Kenney is, kind of spell out who he is. So he's from Calgary, Southeast.
Yep.
That's where he's spent most of his political life. He kind of, in 97, entered politics and started off in that area.
Yeah, he was, that's the first time he was elected as the MP as a member of the then Reform Party.
Yes. But it's always been for a Conservative Party. His politics have been socially conservative. This has been from the very get-go. A lot of those watchdog, I guess you could say, websites that kind of track how different members vote tend to be in favor of his quote-unquote family values and social conservatism.
Yeah. Any of the family life type coalitions,
Yeah. So he actually was key and instrumental in the Harper government for actually engaging immigrant communities.
Yes.
And he was in cabinet positions for that and such.
Yeah, he held several cabinet positions. He was the Minister of Defense, Minister of Employment and Social Development, Minister of Multiculturalism, and the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration. And before the Conservative government got into power, he spent a lot of time in immigrant communities, the grassroots, shoe leather type of politics, to talk to immigrants that had small C conservative values in order to bring them into the fold, as it were. That was arguably quite instrumental in getting the Conservatives into power. It's kind of ironic given the current direction of many elements of the Conservative Party that part of their success was outreach to immigrants. But that is besides the point, and I think we should move on a little bit to the more immediate past.
So, basically, a lot of the recent stories, there have been some less than favorable news on Jason Kenney, I guess.
Well, the Conservative leadership race, although drama-free in terms of result, has been a little bit more controversial in terms of some of the just how it's gone about.
Yeah.
A couple of female candidates withdrew.
Yeah. Donna Kennedy Glantz and Sandra Jansen.
Yes.
Were the 2. One of whom actually defected to the NDP.
Yes, I believe it was Sandra Jansen who defected to the NDP after these incidents. They were leadership candidates for the PC party, and they received a lot of harassment on various meetings. Mm-hmm. And because of that, they withdrew. Yeah. A lot of the harassment was perpetrated seemingly from Jason Kenney supporters.
And it was done to them because they were women.
Yes, that is important.
Which is important to note.
Important to note that their gender definitely played a factor.
Yeah.
Gender has unfortunately played a factor in a lot of harassment of politicians in the recent years.
I mean, Notley completely does not hide the fact that she gets a lot of hate. Yeah. And there's a lot of things said about her that would not... I mean, even Brian Jean, who I don't honestly have a big problem with, initially during the whole campaign thing, he's like, I've been beating this drum for a while about, going back to our roots. I've, beat Rachel Notley, but they tell me I can't do that. Things like that were said all the time by good politicians.
Yeah. It happens a lot. Mm-hmm. Happens locally. It happens... We saw it in the States. It happens. Politics is often a hostile place for women.
Yes.
There are also allegations and confirmed of a couple rules violations in the process of electing Jason Kenney.
No, we don't know. It was a sweep. He got over 75%
Yes.
of the votes, so we don't know to what extent these rule violations could have played, and I argue they probably would not have affected
Well,
the
they wouldn't
results.
they wouldn't have affected it a lot. Jason Kenney
Yeah.
campaigned very, very hard.
Yes.
He campaigned right up to the edge of, and in some cases, over the campaign regulations. He was fined $5,000 for directly campaigning in and around a meeting where they choose delegates.
Yep.
The system of where the PC chose their leader is that they would hold meetings of party members in each particular riding.
Yep.
And these ridings would elect delegates, and these delegates would be sent to the convention in order to elect the leader. Specifically, the Kenney organization ran a hospitality suite right down the hall from where they were choosing the delegations, which is against the campaign regulations.
Mm-hmm.
You're not supposed to campaign right there at the voting booth, essentially.
It's similar to, like, in federal elections, you can't have somebody right outside the door of a polling station telling people how to vote.
Exactly. So that's where that came into play.
Now, he was very gracious about this. He admitted the wrongdoing, paid the fine. There wasn't a big fight on his point.
Yeah.
Or on his end.
So, his goal is going to be to unite the parties of the Wild Rose and the Progressive Conservative Party into one so that they can slay the Rachel Notley dragon, as it were. This is really basically the same playbook that the federal right-wing parties tried to, then actually did, then formed a government by doing. Mm-hmm. So you can argue that they're just not reinventing the wheel, they're just repeating the same thing that worked before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, I find it personally interesting that if you look at the merger of the Progressive Conservative and the Canadian Alliance at the time...
Canadian Reform Alliance Party.
Was it that? And
no, it was that. It was a proposed name for a while until they realized the acronym was crap.
Yeah, exactly. I believe when they first did the talks, they did the Reform Party, then they called themselves the Canadian Alliance when they called themselves the Canadian Alliance when they couldn't get an alliance.
Yeah.
And then they...
these two federal conservative parties, this is years and years ago,
Yes.
but they did basically form a mutual party, a coalition together.
Well, they merged parties.
Yeah, they merged.
Yeah. Not a coalition. That would be.
I guess, that's a different term.
That would be different.
That's a good term, yeah.
That's an entirely different... That's for a time, that was a very dirty word around these parts. You don't realize that.
I realize that.
Okay? But if you look at the platform that was formed when these two parties merged, they moved the platform towards the center a lot. The more conservative and social conservative members of the Reform Party, their views were not nearly as represented in the platform. Whereas if we look at what's a likely outcome of this merger, is that it will move the more centrist, progressive conservative faction and it'll move that towards the right. You look at the views of Jason Kenney, more socially conservative, and you look at who really, Wild Rose has been currently holds more sway, I would say, in
provincial parliament?
Well,
they have more seats, right?
They have more seats, they have more votes, they have more of a base right now. They have, I would say, more of the backing of the rebel, which is a important factor when you look into conservative politics in that right now.
Mm-hmm. Now, we should probably maybe briefly go into the Wild Rose's formation and stuff. I think that's prudent now.
Okay.
Yeah. Because the Wild Rose was formed, how many years ago? It was...
4 or
5 years ago, and it was a response to the PCs, so a direct offshoot, and it was trying to be a grassroots movement, but this was due to the corruption within the PCs. There was a bunch of leadership changeovers and issues with the PC leadership, management of funds, and arguable corruption, and it was a return to proper conservatism, right? Conservative values. Now, I do know some people who clung to that who were socially conservative.
Yes.
I appreciate that. But I also know plenty of people who actually clung to that with a more libertarian perspective because the Wild Rose for a while there was filled with a lot of libertarians. The leader for the longest time, what was her name?
Danielle Smith.
Danielle Smith was libertarian in interviews. And there was a lot of that backing the party. Now, the Wild Rose has taken a shift, and I've heard from these friends that they're a little less friendly with the party now because it's been more taken over by social conservatives. But Kenney coming in and being that socially conservative and try to unite the party, once again, there's an issue of the libertarians and where do they sit in.
Yes, and it's an issue of if they take more conservative positions, will they alienate centrist viewers? Because
the moderates as well,
Because the NDP government is not governing like a...
Leighton-esque federal NDP.
Like a federal NDP, not really governing like an NDP party, really.
Yeah.
They're governing very similarly to a federal Liberal party. They're governing from a fairly centrist position, despite what some might say about certain...
They're quite left for Alberta, but they're very centrist for Canada at large.
I would say so. And I don't, like, the carbon tax...
Well, the federal government...
in doing a carbon tax...
did carbon tax stuff, too. It's not...
The tax hikes have not been huge. They've been slight. We still have one, as we talked about last week, one of the lower tax rates in the...
The spending has gone up, which we mentioned federally. It has gone up. Those budgets look very similar in a lot of ways. So
they're governing from a fairly centrist position. Mm-hmm. And we even saw that one of the PC members felt like they would be more represented in the NDP caucus, which is somewhat odd if you think about it in general terms of Canadian politics.
Yes, that's a massive shift. But in Alberta, it's less so.
It's less so. Because the Liberal Party is essentially persona non grata, the NDP is taking a lot of votes and filling a lot of those voids. So it'd be interesting to see if the merged party, what are they going to call the merged party? That's a good question. The Wild Rose, the conservative Wild Rose, or are they just going to go with conservative and be boring?
I think, honestly, it's probably going to be back to conservative and be boring if it actually ends up merging. Because the Wild Rose was reactionary for a while, and it'll probably just, when it finally goes, because it will go eventually, it'll just drop, it's done its job. But the leaders are going to have a hard time, I'd say, depending on who they're falling under in the PC party, explaining why they've done their job and they no longer need to exist as a party. Because I'm sure... Even with Kenney trying to bring the two parties together, there are still a large amount of Wild Rose supporters who feel that the Wild Rose needs to still make a stand against the Conservatives.
Yeah. The other question I have is that we've seen over the last couple elections that the Wild Rose Party has been somewhat adept at having some of their members say very stupid things. That cost them politically.
They've all contracted foot and mouth disease, as the saying goes.
Definitely. Their first major election prominence, they lost a lot of support. It was a big story about a conservative pastor who was a candidate in a certain riding that a blog post was found that says gays burn in hell, and that did not play well to the voters. You can look at many things Derek Filderbrand has said.
Yeah, he's to me the poster child of the foot and mouth. Like, he just says stuff all the time that gets his party frowning at him.
Whereas one of the successes of Stephen Harper as a politician is his ability to curtail and marginalize anyone who said anything that made the Conservatives unelectable. And it remains to be seen whether Jason Kenney has that in him and has that ability. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes going forward. His first items on the agenda seem to be the carbon tax, because that's one of the main things you do in Alberta politics right now, is criticize the carbon tax. There's been a noise about the gay-straight alliance issue.
Yeah, no, that's arguable if that's still in like kind of the foot and mouth area, because some of this is old stuff that he said, some of this is new, but he basically said recently that, gay straight alliances, if their kids join them, the parents should be informed, with a whole bunch of, LGBTQ people and allies came out saying you can't out people to their parents until they're ready. Yeah. And this is a form of outing. So he's basically not saying all conservatives are anti-gay or anti-gay legislation, but the ones who are more centrist are definitely going to see this and probably be a little less inclined to favor Kenney.
Exactly. The Gay Straight Alliance legislation is a bit controversial because it is forcing some conservative Christian school to form gay straight alliances if their students ask for it. Yeah. This is the change that the NDP made from the Jim Prentice era conservative legislation, which just said that they can form gay straight alliances.
So it is building on a foundation that the conservatives did bring in.
The first bill is students can form gay straight alliances under that name. Second is, if a student asks to form a gay straight alliance, the school has to oblige them. Yeah. And there's been some pushback against that because certain school boards have said that they don't want to be forced to.
Yeah.
Well, the primary one is an Edmonton area school board with basically two schools and actually a whole bunch of homeschoolers that are kind of under it, and very conservative Baptist kind of school. And yeah, they pushed. I mean, the leader of that school board or whatever his name, the board leader,
the school board or whatever.
Whatever. Yeah, he has basically come out and said that there's no gays in their school and that like they don't need this, and they're fighting this on the basis of free speech and rights, and that this shouldn't be forced. And yeah, no, this is one of the things that was a bit of news that we could have possibly covered if we'd started earlier, where this whole fight between him and the education minister here in Alberta kind of boiled, but he basically lost.
Yeah, so you can already see the NDP trying to paint Jason Kenney and the party he may form with the same brush that the Liberals did Stockwell Day and Stephen Harper later, where he is too conservative. He has these conservative views that do not fit with the majority, nice, moderate Canadian and you can already see this playing out, and I think that's a bit of a preview of what will be to come.
So I think our points are basically, as a leader of the now provincial Conservatives, trying to be a leader of all the Conservatives here, it'll be interesting to see how his socially conservative views, as they're still very much on in your face, how they will be received by Albertans at large, because we are generally Canada's most conservative province, or arguable maybe between us and Saskatchewan, but in general.
Yeah.
But we're still Canadian, and I mean, the niqab ban and stuff, Canadians outright rejected stuff like that, so it'll be interesting to see, because Alberta...
I'm not sure if it's quite fair to collapse the niqab ban and so others, and this kind of stuff into each other.
No, it's not, but it's still something that was socially conservative, arguably.
I'm not sure to call it socially conservative. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I just woun't call the niqab ban socially conservative. Like, you're collapsing them together because the people that want the niqab ban are definitely more likely to oppose this GSA bill. But I wouldn't call the niqab ban a classically...
No. Okay, we won't call it socially conservative, but more extremist views tend to get rejected by Canadians. So we'll see how extreme his views get, and how Canadians, specifically Albertans, react to that.
Yeah, well, a more relevant example, you'd have to go a bit back further, where all the talk about Stockwell Day, or even a little bit Stephen Harper using the notwithstanding clause in order to invalidate the Supreme Court's decision about gay marriage.
True.
That was a prime line of attack from the Liberal Party about, like, are you going to do this? And then Stockwell Day was a little bit unclear on that. Don't remember. It's been a while, and I was fairly young at the time, so I don't remember exactly how it goes, but that's a more direct comparison. I think we've covered this enough. I think we should move on to our next story.
Sure. So, in our next story, we'll be talking about two senators.
Two!
For
the price of one.
Two for the price of one that have been involved in Senate scandals that have hit Canadian news and been involved in the news rather recently.
Yeah.
So, our first is a man by the name of Don Meredith, who has a very interesting story, and there's a lot of... there's some irony to it and stuff. So, to back up and say who he is.
I love irony and stuff. That's
That's my band name.
Oh, you beat me to it! I should punch you for that.
So, he's from he lives in Richmond Hill. He's actually originally from Jamaica, which I didn't realize.
Yes.
But he lives in Richmond Hill, and he's been senator since about 2010, although he did try to get into politics back in 2008. He's also, outside of politics, he is a Pentecostal minister.
Yes.
And he's been involved in GTA Faith Alliance, which is a group of black pastors that seek to kind of help in inner city issues in the Greater Toronto area, hence the GTA. So he's been involved in mostly the violence, the youth gang angle, and curtailing that with a bunch of other pastors. He is also apparently owns a landscaping business. But what he's known for in Canadian politics is getting into the Senate.
Yes, he tried in a by-election to get into the House of Commons, but it was kind of a hopeless cause. He was going up against Bob Ray in Inner Toronto, so that was not going to work.
Yeah, when you show your butt on the Rick Mercer report, you're just a shoo-in for Senate.
Did Bob Ray show his butt?
He did. It's hilarious. He went skinny dipping with Rick Mercer.
But I feel like this was after the 2008 by-election in Toronto Centre, because...
No, I'm pretty sure it was before.
Did the Rick Mercer exist in 2008?
I thought so. It might have been 22 minutes. But it was with Rick Mercer. Anyways, off topic.
This is we're getting so far into the weeds of Canadian politics. I couldn't even recognize Bob Ray or his butt.
I'd recognize him, not his butt.
Okay.
He's a fairly nondescript butt, from what I remember.
Okay, good to know.
So he's a reverend. He's in a pastoral position, and this is actually where this comes into play.
Yes.
Because at a church function, he met a girl, and he's been married for a long time. But he started a relationship while she was 16, and it went on for 2 years.
Yes.
Now, apparently, initially, she faked that she was 18, and then told him later that she was 16. But he still continued it thereafter.
Yes.
Now, Canadian law on this, it's not, 18 is not the limit here, 16 is the limit, so he is not...
The age of consent, not the limit. This isn't drinking.
Yeah, this isn't drinking. Sorry, the age of consent is 16 here, with caveats that might come into play with in his position.
Yes.
But in general, it's not seen what he did here as outright illegal. However, it was a breach of ethics. And so in 2015, he got taken away from the Conservatives. They split away from him.
Kicked out of the Conservative
caucus, yeah. But he's still a senator.
Yeah, he joined the Independent Senators group.
Yeah,
which,
the year later.
I believe is a group of unaffiliated senators. I believe part of that was because the Liberals don't have a caucus formally in Senate because Liberals didn't want to have anything to do with the Senate, essentially.
Yep. So that's where we kind of sit, and what happened is now in 2017 he was found guilty of the ethics violation formally this month.
Okay, yeah. The police did an investigation, found that there was no criminal charges that they could lay and reasonably expect a conviction.
Yeah.
Because, although one maybe could argue that his position as a pastor lent him a position of authority.
And then that raises the age of consent to 18.
Yes. You cannot, for example, as a teacher, coach, youth leader of any sort, there's a higher age of consent because of that position of power, position of trust. The affair took place between 2013 and 2015. After the investigation in 2015, that's when he was kicked out of the Conservative caucus.
Yeah.
It's not been a good couple of years for the Senate.
No. There's another scandal that happened much more recently that we'll talk about, but this one, the decision was dropped recently. As an interesting slight aside, so this man, he's generally a social conservative, although on some things, especially LGBTQ rights, he votes more in favor for it than other conservatives would.
Yes.
And I read the original source paper, which is in French.
Ooh.
But he was quoted as talking about the institution of marriage and talking about how, men have to train young boys how to be like men, parents have to train young boys how to be men, and young girls how to be women, and talked about how he wanted to defend the institute of marriage, and how the absence of marriage and people sleeping around is what causes all sorts of societal problems.
This was in context mostly of teenage pregnancy type issues, youth problems, again, tying into the GTA faith alignments with youth gangs and guns.
But one of his stipulations for helping correct all this sleeping around was get married, and he had an extramarital affair, which is
Do you remember the specific quote, which was the most hilarious and deserving of the irons?
Yeah, the quote is, "When we have marriages, we don't have these social problems." Talking about
premarital sex, which I guess is apparently didn't happen in this case, except on the one end that wasn't his, so it's all good.
Extramarital, that's different.
It's great.
Oh boy.
Anyway. So basically everyone has been calling for his resignation. He's resistant. His first lawyer was
a piece of work.
Interesting. Let's just say.
So his first lawyer ended up playing a bunch of cards which a lot of people felt, and us too, felt were improperly used. One was the race card.
He played that race card.
He played that so hard, saying that he would not be treated like this if he was white. But then every reporter is like, there's no other senator being accused of having sex with a 16-year-old for 2 bloody years while being married. That's an ethics issue.
Let's note that he probably wasn't having sex all those 2 years.
Yeah.
That's just there were a couple of instances of sex.
Yes,
Possibly, it seems to be what the
isolated incidents, but it was an ongoing
a somewhat sexual relationship.
Yes. And the other thing that he definitely did was he used child marriages in other cultures as a way of trying to lessen the damage that having sex with a 16-year-old would be.
It's normal,
It's normal.
In many cultures, like there's women that get
down to 13.
Yeah, it's all good. It's fine.
We heard arguments like that, except gay arguments, and we talked about them recently.
What are we talking about?
The pederasty and Milo Yiannopoulos.
Oh, okay.
It's a kind of a similar argument.
Is it?
He brought up like the Roman ideal and said that relationship can be good.
No, he didn't bring up the Roman ideal. He brought up things that were reminiscent of the Roman
Reminiscent of it.
I would say. He didn't.
Yes. He didn't explicitly bring up. Anyways, his first lawyer is now off the case. It's unknown if he got canned or left, but it was apparently...
Well, it's known that he now has a different lawyer.
He has a different lawyer.
And now that he got canned. I think that we can say for sure, certain.
The new lawyer is much more well-spoken and is basically going the angle of, hey, we're not going to do anything with him until the law comes to a head. Which is
the process.
Yeah, the due process, which is what you argue in this case.
Yes, the Senate committees are looking into forcing his expulsion.
Yes.
And there's a lot of pushback against Don Meredith from many members of the Senate. I have not seen a lot of people defending him, honestly. No. When you, again, same thing with Milo, when you mess around with children or minors or teenagers even, and sex, those are things that people are just like, no, I'm not gonna even be seen at all, like I'm even close to defending this at all. So, speaking of things that no one is defending, Lindbergh is also in some hot water for some comments about the residential school system.
Oh. So, in a previous podcast, we were talking about the Truth and Reconciliation Committee.
Yes.
And their findings. Now, Lindbergh has been critical of this.
Yes.
She has been critical. And so, in a 20-minute speech that she was making, she made some comments. Now, she admits that these were just a small part of her speech, which was supposed to be focusing on, indigenous problems like water and, infrastructure.
Overrepresentation of indigenous peoples in correctional facilities.
Exactly.
Ooh.
However, in the same speech, she also was upset that the good deeds of the residential schools were being overshadowed by some of these controversies, right? Though there were well-intentioned people trying to do good things and talking specifically about trying to convert these indigenous people to Christianity.
Yes, seems to be a lot of the impetus for this. She was rather distraught that the Truth and Reconciliation Council that found systematic abuses, both mental, physical, and sexual, up to 6,000 deaths from malnutrition and disease, that they didn't focus on the good things that happened from this.
Yeah.
The good things that happened.
Say both sides of the story.
The good things that happened from taking indigenous children from their homes and putting them into schools where they were not allowed to speak their language, where many agents of the school subjected them to physical and sexual abuse. A process that meets a lot of what the United Nations defines as cultural genocide. She was rather upset that the Truth and Reconciliation Council did not look at the bright side.
The bright side. Oh. And, her opponents, once again, we're talking about no defense here. They're conservatives coming out and trying to distance themselves.
I've not seen a conservative try to defend this. I haven't seen I haven't seen, is the Rebel even touching this?
Okay, so let's just the Indigenous Affairs, the people who speak on it. So on the Democratic Party, the NDP,
the NDP Aboriginal Affairs critic, the Conservative Aboriginal Affairs critic,
and the Liberal,
the Aboriginal Affairs Minister, Indigenous and Northern Affairs.
Indigenous and Northern Affairs.
They all came out against it. The NDP
guy specifically said this is like Holocaust denying.
Yes.
Because bear in mind that the NDP Indigenous Affairs critic is actually a residential school survivor himself.
Yes.
And the conservative one brought up the fact that, which we mentioned earlier when we were giving our talk about the whole 60s scoop settlement.
Yes.
But Stephen Harper, back when he was Prime Minister, formally apologized on behalf of all Canadians for residential schools. So you can't then, as a conservative, come out in favor of this. So she's been hit on all fronts.
Yes. All of the church organizations and denominations that were involved in the running of residential schools spoke out against her. Mm-hmm. There has been, again, no defense. Now, it's important to...
No, she does have a defense.
What is her defense?
Fake news.
Oh, the classic!
Yeah, she's been talking that, once again, as we kind of alluded to earlier, that in her 20-minute speech, it was only a little bit that talked about this, and the focus was elsewhere. And so the fake news is propagating this as a thing.
The exaggeration.
Exaggeration.
And fake news.
I mean, you're asking me, if you said it, you said it. Regardless of how much you were focusing on it, you said it.
And she's not backing down from this. She's still maintaining her opinion and her facts and matter. And this is important because she has some actual power here. The Senate is not nearly as powerful as it is in other democracies. But they still read through legislation. They still amend legislation. They still vote on legislation.
Legislation.
And Lynn Bayek is on the Aboriginal Affairs Committee. Mm-hmm. She goes through legislation to deal with Aboriginal affairs. Yeah. And she has been also calling for an audit of all money going into and out of reserves.
Yes.
So she is in a position to act on her
distorted
opinions, willfully ignorant opinions of Aboriginal people and their history.
Yeah.
So that's, to my mind, a lot more troubling even than the Don Meredith story. Because the Don Meredith story, even if he avoids expulsion from the Senate and or does not resign, he is on an island. He might be in part of some committees, but he's not going to have any...
Well, and the question, too, is, although that scandal is definitely an ethics violation, the question is how much does it affect his decision on policies?
Exactly. It definitely is a huge ethics violation, and he should leave the Senate. But this is a person who is willfully ignorant about the things that are essentially their job.
Yeah.
So that's troubling. I'm not sure if there's anything else we really want to go through on this.
No, we'll probably have an update in the coming weeks with regards to how, if she's still on the committee, or how it looks legally for her in terms of maintaining her Senate position.
Yes. It's same with Don Meredith, whether he retains his position in the Senate.
Yeah.
I'll be interested to see how that plays out. I think that's about all we have to deal with it. Let's talk a little bit more about people that might be dealing with some scandal in international news. So, heating up and possibly still gonna get hotter and hotter is the story of Trump's Russian ties. Now...
Alleged.
Are we alleging? Or
we're alleging. Dude, are we the rebel?
Well, we're not the rebel, but there's it. We're not talking about actual criminal things. We might be talking about actual criminal things. We're just saying Russian ties.
I don't want the master of the deal suing us for libel.
I don't think he will. Okay? I think there's other people he will sue for libel before us. I think he's gonna sue the entire world for libel before us.
Maybe.
There's
who knows? We might get famous, but this might be our breakout.
Ooh! Donald Trump, please sue us. Please sue us. That'd be great.
Trending on Reddit and YouTube.
And Twitter. Can we trend on Twitter?
We don't have a Twitter yet, do we? You haven't made us a Twitter.
You should make us a Twitter.
You should.
Can we trend on Snapchat? Does Snapchat's trend?
I don't know.
What about Instagram?
Instagram's totes trend.
Can we get on Vine?
Vine.
Vine is Vine.
Vine, our podcast, have like 20,000 vines, and that's our podcast.
Vine's gone now.
I know.
Okay, so Vine's gone.
Anyway.
So, during the American presidential election, I believe we mentioned this story a little bit before, Russia hacked both major political parties in the States, hacked their email servers, and leaked the findings of the
DNC
to WikiLeaks. Now, it's the opinion of the intelligence community that this was done not just to destabilize the American democratic system, but it was to specifically elect Donald Trump over Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
Now, Russia's might have good reason to do that, as Trump has made a lot of favorable comments about Putin and towards Russia.
What are some of these comments?
Well, he has dismissed one specific thing is that and this is the most recent one I think of, is that he was in an interview with Bill O'Reilly, where Bill O'Reilly called Putin a killer. Mm-hmm. And Trump was like, well, we got a lot of killers over here, too. Very much minimizing the deaths of Putin opponents in Russia.
Yeah.
A lot of people who have opposed Putin have ended up dead under very suspicious circumstances.
Yes.
Had a poisoned shot. So that's one example. Another important note is that Trump favors resetting relations with Russia. Resetting relations after all these sanctions that the U.S. have put on Russia due to Russia's aggression in the Crimean Peninsula.
Yeah, which we spoke about very recently. So
yes, exactly.
You kind of know how Russia, if you listened regularly, you know how Russia acted in that situation.
The question is whether there were any coordination between Russia and the Trump campaign team. Mm-hmm. Russia, for example, may have let the Trump campaign team know what was leaking and when. Yeah. In order
so they could plan their reaction.
Strategize, that kind of thing. One report that did allege that there was coordination was the British intelligence report that was leaked to the media by BuzzFeed around the time of the inauguration.
Once again, we said this in the previous podcast about BuzzFeed. They have the stupid quizzes, but their journalism is actually on point.
It's kind of interesting how they do that, because the stupid quizzes actually pay for the journalism. The stupid quizzes and the advertorial content is what pays for the journalism, not actual advertising, really, as such. So that intelligence report contained salacious details about Russian prostitutes and urine, but also contained a lot of more boring, meat and potatoes things about Trump aides and staffers and advisors talking to members of the Russian government at certain times to coordinate strategies.
Yeah, now, and these things, obviously, they weren't in the rooms, but they coordinated the meeting. They saw them coordinate meeting at the same times and stuff, is what these reports say.
Yes. Yeah. And it's important to note that some of these allegations have been corroborated. The allegations of the meetings of Trump people with ambassadors at certain times, that has been corroborated. So there has been lots of investigations. There's investigations in both the House and the Senate into the nature of the cyber attacks. In addition, there's been a lot of heat on a lot of Trump-affiliated individuals for ties to Russia.
This is where the story comes into play.
Flynn resigned over meetings with the Russian ambassador. Jeff Sessions got in hot water for meeting with Russian ambassadors during the campaign and then lying about it during his appointment Senate hearing. Yeah. Now, there are investigations, as I said, going in both the Congress and the Senate. Now, the leader of the investigation in Congress is the Republican head of the Select House Committee on Intelligence, Devin Nunes. And his integrity has recently been brought into question. Let's just say. Yeah.
Well, this is something where if he's specifically dealing with these allegations here and making a decision on it, you better have no tie whatsoever. And in this recent news, when Trump was bringing up the whole Obama wiretap thing, he was fully on Trump's side. Bear in mind, pretty much everyone has distanced themselves from this wiretap claim and has apologized for allowing this to go so far and get so much traction because there has been no evidence of it.
No one is touting this for the most part except for the White House. The White House is still touting this claim that Obama had wiretapped Donald Trump. Big history of tapping political opponents in U.S. political history. That is what the Watergate scandal actually was, if you don't know. The Nixon administration tapped hotels at Watergate. That's where the name comes from. Of his political opponents. So this carries a lot of weight and historical heft to it.
And it'll go way back to Nixon's, but
Yeah. So, Devin Nunes provided information to the White House that perhaps the Obama administration and intelligence officials might have incidentally eavesdropped on Trump during the campaign. Now, this, again, still turned out to be not true, and Nunes himself distanced himself from that.
Yeah.
And this calls into question whether he is going to be impartial. He's also been dragging his feet a lot during this investigation, and the Democrats in the House have called for his removal from the committee, saying that he should resign. The Senate investigations are going a little bit more smoothly. They definitely are trying to look like the adults in the room, for sure.
The Canadian senators, I guess, could learn a little bit from them.
It's a kind of very much reversed because in the States, the average senator has a lot more power than the average congressman.
True.
There's less of them. You're longer term.
Brent? Fewer.
Again? Really? What does it go again? Less has to be a...
Less is a gradual.
Less has to be something
Fewer is integer-based.
Integer-based. What if there's a half a senator?
Oh.
Then we could go less?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, if half is the division, then it still can be an integer. Like if you can get 0.3754 of a senator.
I think we can. I think. Well, how much does John McCain count? I'm sorry, John McCain. I mean, I'm not really that really sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
I might, if I was in the U.S. in 2008, I might have voted for you, John McCain, because of my political views at that particular point. Okay? And you're sometimes okay, John McCain.
You're sometimes okay. That's his new campaign slogan.
Okay, yeah. You're sometimes okay, John McCain. Okay, so there are fewer senators than there are congressmen. Also, they are elected to longer terms.
Yes.
Becoming a senator is often a prime route towards a vice presidency or presidency bid. A senator is very prominent.
Whereas in Canada, the senators are usually kind of separate from the rest of politics to a degree.
They are appointed, and they are appointed technically lifetime appointments. Yeah. But they are just...
originally senators were like the aristocracy, right? And the House of Commons were the common folk.
Yeah.
Right? So they were the prominent businessmen and stuff that would be on the ruling body of Canada.
Yeah, exactly. But they have very little political power.
True.
And so that's kind of what's going with the investigations. If there is any criminal investigation from the FBI, from the Department of Justice, Jeff Sessions has said that he will recuse himself from these investigations because of his meetings with Russia and his ties to the Trump team, obviously. Yeah. So that's kind of where we stand. We have a lot of Trump-affiliated people that are set to testify before these House and Senate committees.
No, the aforementioned Flynn.
Yes.
The most breaking news with him, which is rather interesting, is he has in talks to accept immunity.
Yes.
During his
in exchange for testimony.
In exchange for testimony, which is interesting because you back it up about a year.
Yes.
And during the campaign trail, he was quoted as saying, essentially, if you're going to accept immunity, you pretty much have committed a crime.
Yes, exactly.
So it's a little funny that now he's looking at possibly accepting immunity.
Yes, other people set to testify include Paul Manafort, who was a former campaign manager of Donald Trump.
This is before Kellyanne Conway.
And Steve Bannon took over.
Yeah.
Paul Manafort was, and after they fired Corey Lewandowski for a battery charge for grabbing a reporter. Just a wonderful cast of characters they got there on that team. Paul Manafort has fairly significant ties to Russia. He worked for Ukrainian pro-Russian president. He has done a lot of work for various dictatorships throughout the world after he got out of U.S. electoral politics. So it'd be interesting to see what he has to say about Trump's possible ties to Russia. Paul Manafort, easy to tie him to Russia. He's talked with Russian people all the time. Roger Stone is an interesting one. He's a longtime Trump advisor who claimed to have ties to WikiLeaks, who leaked the actual DNC emails. And whether he does or not is an open question. WikiLeaks and Julian Assange deny that Roger Stone has any tie to him. But if Roger Stone does have ties to WikiLeaks, that raises a lot of questions. Yeah. Because Roger Stone, as a Trump advisor, advising, knowing...
There's almost a direct link there.
There's almost a direct link. He claimed to know what was going to leak before it leaked.
Yeah. Now, Roger Stone in his own right is an interesting character.
Yes.
Yeah, we were watching...
He's not known for his modesty.
Yeah. We were watching
or his
something...
restraint.
We were watching something earlier today, and he said some pretty inflammatory thing, which has gotten him banned from all sorts of publications and stuff.
He's gotten banned from Fox News.
Yeah. Which is not an easy feat.
No.
So... yeah, this guy, I mean, it could be easily that he's saying this because he says everything.
Yep.
But, I mean, in my opinion, it's a stupid move to be saying this at this point in time because you just don't want to be pushing any sort of Trump-Russian connection right now.
Yeah, no, again, not Russia, but WikiLeaks.
Well, WikiLeaks, which allegedly has ties to Russia.
Yes. So you're drawing a bit...
Yeah.
But... so this story...
you need one of those, like, Crazy Man pin board with the lines for some of this.
It's either Crazy Man or...
Beautiful Mind?
Beautiful Mind or police investigations.
Yes.
You gotta draw up the organizational chart of the mob.
Yeah.
And then you gotta put a King of Hearts and then put a pin on it.
Yeah.
And then it's Kingpin and then referencing Daredevil. That's how they reference the Kingpin.
Nice.
I don't think they actually use the word Kingpin. But at one point, they're, like, trying to figure out what the criminal conspiracy is. And they're, like, had a question mark. And it's, like, a King of Hearts. And that's the pin in it.
Yeah. Oh, you also forgot to mention Stone's another involvement in American politics.
Oh, yeah. He was part of Nixon's campaign team.
Yeah! So...
full circle!
Going back to Nixon, what happened after Watergate with him?
He got impeached. So...
the question now.
we'll see what happens. It feels like there's a lot more that will get revealed. It feels like there's a lot that certain people at possibly the FBI, that certain intelligence communities know that will get released as they do investigations.
The testimonies when they finally happen, we'll see what comes of them.
Once things are deemed to be in the public interest to be declassified.
Yes. But I mean, we can see the reaction after the testimonies to see what comes. That's the next step. I think,
exactly.
Yeah.
So this story is pretty hot right now, but my prediction is that this will continue to get hotter. Mm-hmm. This story is not going away, and Trump's approval ratings continue to plummet after the failure of his healthcare deal.
Yeah, he. If you go back to his old tweets, he criticizes some old Obama and stuff for low approval ratings, and he's far decreased.
He's
beyond
lower
that.
Beyond Obama's even lowest. He's
Yeah.
lower than most presidents get in their terms.
Especially this early.
Presidents tend to go through a honeymoon period, as we talked about earlier. And
last week, yeah.
The thing is, there's not a lot of easy wins for him coming up.
No.
The thing he wants to push through next is a tax reform bill, which if you thought healthcare was hard and complicated and had obstacles and opponents on all sides, tax reform is going to be more of that. The one possibility of something that he could do to get a fairly easy win is the Supreme Court nomination of Neil Garouche.
I don't know how to pronounce his
Garouche?
last name.
Yeah. Where, if you look at the polling on the Supreme Court Justice nominee himself, it's not too bad. But if he becomes the Supreme Court nominee gets tied more and more to Trump, that can very easily change.
Yeah.
And it's looking like the Democrats will try to filibuster the nomination more and more. So then it goes to the Republican Senate, and whether they want to use the nuclear option, which the Democrats, I believe, used to get their appointees in during the last Obama administration. So there's a lot of very complex political machinations, but the long and short of it is it doesn't look like there's an easy path to raise the approval of Donald Trump anytime soon.
And, as this goes on, it's likely just to decrease even more.
That seems like one of the more likely outcomes.
All right.
So let's end on a lighter note. Let's do it.
Video games?
Oh, video games.
All right. So, next we'll be talking about PC gaming, but unfortunately, I'm not going to be the one on the forefront of this sucker.
No, you know why? Because all the PC games that you play are 5 years old.
Hey, they're 5 years old, or heavily story-driven, or, multiplayer is not my...
Well, I'm just saying that you play nothing that's ever in the news.
No, Long Dark, you opened it accidentally today, and that's actually it's still a beta build.
Oh, wow, that's exciting.
But then I'm also playing Mountain Blade Warband, which, hey, there's a new one coming out.
That's really great. I thought I thought it was my turn to bore you about what I'm interested in.
All right, you talk about your Heart of the Swarm, okay?
The Heart of the Swarm, or the yes. Okay.
The Blizzard game with the acronym HOTS, Heart of the Swarm.
Exactly. I'm going to talk about Dota. I'm not going to talk about Dota. So, and also, Long Dark, really, some moderately unknown independent game is like what you're...
Hey, it's a company in Vancouver. It's a good game.
Okay.
I highly recommend it.
Okay, guys. So I play a lot of this multiplayer MOBA game called Heroes of the Storm.
MOBA? What's a MOBA, Brent?
MOBA is a massively online battle arena. It comes out of a Warcraft theme mod called Defense of the Ancients, in which a bunch of minions spawn at your base and go through, and they have to try to get through the towers and the forts to get to the other person's base. And then there's heroes going through in the lanes, getting experience.
So you play as the heroes and the minions are NPCs.
The minions are just go and die, just in like waves.
Okay.
And then you farm the minions for experience to level up your hero and kill other heroes and kill the enemy base.
Alright. So it's a competitive game, a strategy game, but instead of building bases like in an RTS,
yes,
what you're doing is you're controlling only one unit,
yes,
with a bunch of abilities, the special abilities, and then there's a bunch of what's the term from an 80s action movies? There's a bunch of mooks that just kind of run in waves and die, and then you're trying to fight with your mooks to beat the enemy.
Yes, sometimes you can get mercenary camps to get
tougher mooks.
Yeah, no, you can kill also tougher mooks to get experience, or have them push down the lane as well. In the case of mine, so I do Heroes of Storm, which is Blizzard MOBA. Blizzard, ironically, does not have the most popular MOBA, even though it comes from a mod of a Blizzard game. League of Legends and Dota are the more popular ones, but I don't play them because they're too complex and they involve things like last-hitting minions and...
toxicity?
I mean, Heroes of the Storm, from my experience, has the fair share of toxicity, but nothing like what I hear the LOL community, LOL
League
community.
of Legends community is pretty brutal.
It's just like... I mean, I have been told to uninstall the game a couple times, but, not every game, so it's alright.
And your mother hasn't been grievously offended.
My mother has not been grievously offended. I don't think ever. I mean, I've gotten some great casual racism, though.
Oh.
And not so casual racism.
Alright. Well, anyways, so what's new about Heroes of the Storm?
They're going to Heroes 2.0.
The heroing?
Yes. The quickening. The electric boogaloo of this. So, Heroes is a little bit different than a lot of the other MOBAs in that it's a lot more focused on team fighting 5v5 against all the other heroes as opposed to farming the XP from the minions, which I find much more boring, which is why I like Heroes. And also, with their map variation, most of the other MOBAs are only on one map. Your boredom is palpable, Christian.
Yeah, competitive gaming does that to me.
It's I can palp it.
Oh, yeah.
I hope the boredom of our audience is not... Are you kidding?
Well, that was interesting. There you go.
Very interesting.
My mom and dad say hi.
Great. Dino Man's mom and dad say hi. So, Heroes 2.0. Yeah, so the Heroes has different maps, which makes it different and less boring because the maps add variety and different heroes are better on each map. Yeah, it's cool. I like it. It's fun. Well, there are Heroes 2.0. See, before, you weren't getting a lot of rewards for continually playing the game and wasting your life. You weren't getting a lot of in-game rewards. Once you got, player levels were capped at level 40. You achieved that fairly early on. Hero levels, once you got your heroes up to level 8, it took forever to get from level 8 to level 9. And there was very little incentive to do so.
So they're taking Heroes of the Storm and they're injecting it with crack.
Yes, exactly. So now you level up your heroes faster. Your player level is uncapped. Your hero level is uncapped.
Oh, wow.
Your player level is now like the sum of all your hero levels.
But here's the do they have any Skinner boxes?
They might. They might have some Skinner box type thing. This is a free-to-play game, so I'm perfectly fine with them having free-to-play things. And every time you get a hero level, you get a loot chest. A loot crate, in fact, I think is what they're calling it.
I think they're loot chests. That seemed to be the terminology I saw.
They're calling chests. Okay.
Yeah.
Loot crate, it's Overwatch, it's crate. That's why
well,
I get it.
and Loot Crate is like the service where you can buy and get the box at home with the random goodies for like $15 a month. We're not currently sponsored by Loot Crate.
We would be sponsored by Loot Crate.
Oh, I would totally horn our podcast for Loot Crate.
The main take-home of this podcast is please sue us, Donald Trump, and could we get a Loot Crate sponsorship?
Loot Crate, hit us up with that collab.
Collab! No collab, but we don't like the collab between Russia and Trump campaign, but we like the collab between us and sponsors to give us money because we're broke.
Yeah.
Anyway, Heroes 2.0. So every hero level, you get a loot crate. And in that loot crate can be heroes. Skins. They're adding announcer packs.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, is it any of the big names like Total Biscuit and stuff?
I know. So far, it's just like characters from the Blizzard games and announcing packs, voicing. So, like, when you die, one of Murky or Bright.
I heard Total Biscuit did some voice work for them, so I thought that was
for heroes or like League. You thinking League?
No, I'm pretty sure it was Heroes because he's Blizzard. He's always been. He initially was with StarCraft stuff. I thought.
To Total Biscuit?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe. I don't know.
Whatever. Anyway.
No, I've not heard anything about voice. Maybe they can get JonTron to do some voice work. That's a joke.
Yeah.
Because he might be a Nazi, and because of that,
everyone distances.
Ukulele fired him from a voice role. So that's a joke, guys. Okay? Yeah. So, voice packs, they're adding sprays, they're adding emojis, they're adding all sorts of things that they can give to you in loot crates, or that you can
buy with in-game currency that you get for playing the game?
Buy with in-game currency that you get from mostly shards and duplicate stuff that you'd use for that. You can use the money, real money to get loot chests, and you can... It's gonna be a little bit more rewarding to play this game, which I've spent a lot of time doing. So I'm kind of pumped for this. They seem to be really ramping up production. There's always new heroes. They're really good.
When's this launching? Or has it launched?
It's in beta right now. So it's launching sometime in the next 2 weeks. I haven't actually figured out exactly when it's going to. There's going to be a new map soon. Oh. That's exciting for me. I could use a new map. They need to kick off one or two later. Garden of Terror needs to go. That's my professional opinion. Garden of Terror...
Can you veto maps like in other games?
No, there's no veto system except at the professional level. They'd have a couple map bans. Are you wanting to talk to your parents and not me about a video game you don't play?
No. I'm redirecting you to the mic.
Oh, learn your craft.
Exactly.
All right. Can we are we going to make that a meme, or the fact that I said that it's a meme is not going to be a meme?
You can't force a meme. Memes have to grow organically.
Tell that to Palmer Luckey.
Okay.
Do you know? It's a joke. It's a great joke.
No, I don't.
Palmer Luckey, Oculus Rift founder, got into somewhat trouble for making anti-Hillary memes. And using some of his money to do so. We're diverting quite a bit from the main topic, which is Heroes 2.0, and how I'm kind of pumped for it, because I think I own most of the heroes in the game, and I've done it mostly through not actually spending any money. I think I've spent $10 to $20, maybe.
Wow. Okay.
Maybe on the game. Just a couple bundles of heroes that were on for cheap that gave me lots of heroes, so that I didn't have to use my gold, which I was grinding for. And I think they're giving me like 70 loot chests, possibly, at the beginning because of the time I already spent. So it's gonna be pretty great. I'm pretty pumped for it. I think we should wrap up. This has been a good show.
Yeah, this has been good. So, I guess until next time.
We're not doing the thing where the thing goes over. Or we could just do. I'm Bandringer.
I'm the Dino Man.
Fight Nazis and stay frosty.
Peace.
Leave my final plug in. Jason Kenney's Jason Kenney's
Get it all out.
Jason Kenney's PC leadership. Jason Kenney's conservative leadership win. Nice. Okay, one more.
One more.
JC's.
Do you want me to do it?
No, I got that. I got this. This is good. Jason Kenney's conservative. Jason Kenney's PC leadership win. Jason Kenney's PC leadership win.
It's so
Jason
quiet.
Kenney's PC leadership win.
Okay.